This was an unprecedented mailing flub that's heightened concerns about the integrity of expanding mail-in voting and mail-in voting efforts. It's a disaster. Just horrible stories on mail-in ballots. We don't want to have a rigged election. I know that. With all of the bundling that you're going to have, with the harvesting you're going to have, with people being sent ballots all over that have maybe nothing to do with the state anymore, it's a terrible thing.
Allegations of massive possible fraud in the US elections by none other than the sitting president.
I stand before you today to declare the silent majority is stronger than ever before.
As the world continues to grapple with COVID-19, a big debate is gripping the US. Should people be allowed to vote by mail or in person? The outcome of this debate may also have an effect on India, with the Bihar Assembly elections slated not much later than the US polls. So what exactly are postal ballots?
Postal ballots they've been in use since Civil War. I mean, it's to make it easier for people to vote. So, there is a process by which you apply for it, and absentee ballots and or postal ballots processes are almost the same. And you apply, you were sent a postal ballot which you vote, and it's a self-addressed envelope which you send back by a certain date.
There are two types of postal ballots, though the difference is not very stark. Mail-in ballots are automatically sent to all registered voters. In absentee ballots, registered voters have to put in a request. For both of these, the process begins with election authorities sending a ballot to the voter's address, who then fills it and places it in a security envelope to keep it private. The voter then puts the sealed ballot in another envelope, puts their signature on it and mails it. Officials cross-check the voter's name, address, and also signature if needed. On election day, the mail ballots are counted and added to the total tally. Different states in the US have different rules regarding postal ballots. Some automatically send these ballots to all voters. At least 6 states are now planning to hold all mail ballot elections as per reports. However, some states require people to give legitimate reasons why they want to vote by mail. In others, no reasons are needed to use postal ballots. Despite mail voting being practiced in the US for decades, Donald Trump has raised the specter of large-scale fraud now.
Talking about some mail-in voting that just was revealed, just the news. 500,000 incorrect absentee ballot applications were sent all across the state of Virginia, including to many dead people. This was an unprecedented mailing flub that's heightened concerns about the integrity of expanding mail-in voting and mail-in voting efforts. It's a disaster. All over Virginia, 500,000 votes. So that's something you have to think about. We don't want to have a rigged election. I know that. And you have to be very careful when you mention, as you constantly do, Russia, or you mention China, or you mention Iran, or others that attack our election system. And when you have this mail-in voting, it's very susceptible. It's something that can be easily attacked by foreign countries and by, frankly, Democrats and by Republicans. And I think that it's something you have to start thinking about very seriously. Our system's not equipped for it. The post office is not equipped for it. And people should vote like they did in World War I and World War II. Many newspapers have had terrible stories. You see them all over the internet. They've had some just horrible stories on mail-in ballots. You look at Arizona, you don't even have to have, as you know, they have a provision where they don't have to check signatures. So you sign it and you could have a totally different signature. It's okay. it won't be approved. They have the right to go 7 days after the election for approval. So you're not even going to know who won the state of Nevada. All of the bundling that you're going to have, with the harvesting you're going to have, with people being sent ballots all over that have maybe nothing to do with the state anymore, it's a terrible thing. In New York, they had the Carolyn Maloney situation, and I criticized it badly over the last 2 years and 2 days. I mean, I gave it some very, very strong criticism, and all of a sudden, like a miracle, they just approved the winner. Well, what happened? Did the person that was second concede the race, even though it was very close and all mixed up? They have a terrible situation in New York with the ballots, you know that. They send out millions of ballots. They're totally unprepared to do it. And then they come back in the millions. It's going to be a disaster. I'm doing our country a big favor by bringing it up. And, you know, from a common standpoint, even common sense standpoint, if you look at it just out of common sense and pure, basic, beautiful intelligence, you know it can't work.
Trump is alleging that there can be misuse of this process when there is very little evidence to back that up. He himself has voted by postal ballot many times. He and his family, many members of his cabinet, have voted by postal ballot. And his fear is that he's alleged that it will be misused against him. And there are no grounds. He has not given any evidence. He's talked about election fraud for a very long time. He had even set up a commission to look into it, election abuse and fraud. But that commission was wound up for lack of any evidence. They didn't find anything. And there have been cases of election fraud, abuse, etc., but they've been so few and so sparse that people don't really think it's a serious problem yet.
The Democrats have vehemently criticized Trump's claims. They have called the Republicans' efforts to limit mail ballots voter suppression on steroids. The opposition party also calls postal ballots a tool to protect voters from COVID and ensuring that fear of the virus doesn't rob them of their basic right. There have been recorded instances of cheating in the past. Alleged fraud occurred in the 2018 North Carolina 9th Congressional District poll. A ballot collector for the Republican candidate was accused of ballot harvesting. In the 2020 New Jersey municipal poll, hundreds of ballots were found stuffed in a postbox and 2 Democratic councillors were charged with fraud. However, experts claim that alleged fraud incidents are very rare. As per the Brennan Center for Justice, the rate of voting fraud is 0.00004 to 0.0009%. As per a database of the Arizona State University, 491 fraud cases were found among hundreds of millions of votes.
So he's opposed it, but he, if you remember recently, he said voters in Florida should be allowed to do that because the Florida election system is robust and they've taken care, they've plugged all the loopholes, etc. When the Florida system is no different from any other states, and but Florida is a swing state, and he must win the state to Florida is among one of the few states that he must win to get the presidency or win a second term, and a lot of Republicans also vote by postal ballot. So he kind of reversed himself in the case of Florida, but and he even, if you remember, he threatened to, not threatened, he suggested that the election date be postponed, etc., in view of the COVID-19 epidemic. So,
whether the US votes by ballot or in person will depend on the decisions of state administrations.
So that's the situation, and I think voting is on in some states already. A lot of states are voting, postal ballot voting has already started in many states. But again, I mean, the US has never used postal ballots on the scale that it expects to now because of the epidemic, when people do not want to go to a polling booth. So there are questions about whether the US postal service will be able to handle this volume of postal ballots, and So recently in the Democratic primaries in New York and New Jersey, there were instances in which there were a lot of confusion, lots of votes cast were discarded, disqualified because they were missing one because of some technicality or the other, which essentially stemmed from the fact that a lot more people were voting by postal ballot in those elections than ever before. And it was just system was overwhelmed by the size and volume of the response.
Ensuring mail voting for all voters may cost the US a whopping $1.4 billion as per the Brennan Center. But one way or the other, the United States may end up setting a template for elections in the COVID era.